Okay, people, listen up. Here we go. This is Nature's Secret Service, the podcast that puts you in the room with the men and women of wildlife law enforcement. I'm your host, Ed Newcomer, and this is the last bonus episode, bridging between seasons 2 and 3. Season 3, Wolves, premieres on June 2nd. I hope you'll tune in and tell all your friends about it. For this bonus episode, I decided I should just tell you about one of my adventures as a special agent. It's not a particularly big case. In fact, it didn't even result in criminal charges or any kind of referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and wasn't even my investigation. But I was along for the ride, and I think it's a great story. In 2005, I was working in the Los Angeles field office of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we had a fully staffed special agent group. We had at that time, I think we had about 8 special agents working out of the LA field office. So we were busy, and all those agents were really kicking ass. I had been sent up to Monterey, California, to work on an investigation related to the illegal killing of some sea otters. There had been a rash of sea otter shootings in Monterey Bay, so I went up there for a few days to do some interviews and scout around and start an investigation. While I was in Monterey, I got a phone call from a special agent named Neil Mendelson, who was one of my colleagues in the Los Angeles field office. Neil was a fantastic agent. He was one of these guys that was always working on something good. We used to call him, his nickname at the office was Felony Fred, because he made so many felony wildlife cases. He was actually younger than me, but he was the first agent I met on the very first day I reported for duty at the LA field office, and we became quick friends. Although he was younger than me, he was already an experienced agent by the time I reported for duty. And, I was kind of in awe of him. He had a great reputation. He worked on great cases. And, he was one of these guys who was really fun to work with, because not only was he really professional and really good at his job, but he always knew exactly the right thing to say to make everybody laugh. So we might all be, real busy on a high stress assignment, like executing a search warrant or something like that. And at the end of the day, when everybody was pretty stressed out, Neil would crack exactly the correct joke at exactly the correct time, and everybody would relax and laugh. He could also be pretty high strung. When he was working on an affidavit for a search warrant, I knew to pretty much stay clear of his office. I might stop in to ask if he needed anything, but other than that, I was going to leave him alone. Anyway, I'm in Monterey working on this sea otter investigation, and I get a phone call from Neil Mendelson. And Neil says, "Hey, Ed, I got something going on up in Santa Barbara County. On your way back from Monterey, do you want to meet me? I need some help." So I said, "Yeah, what do you got going on? What time do you need to see me?" All of those things. Well, as it turns out, Neil was about to conduct an inspection of the Neverland Ranch in Santa Barbara County. Now, that may sound familiar to you, because that is where Michael Jackson used to live. He lived on a huge property in Santa Barbara County called the Neverland Ranch. Turned out Neil had received, or our office had received, a complaint. I don't remember who the complaint was from, but it was basically that the endangered species held on Neverland Ranch were being mistreated. Now, if you don't remember Neverland Ranch, like I said, big property. Michael Jackson's house was on that property, but he had a private zoo, and he had a lot of endangered animals in that zoo. I didn't even know what he had, but one of the animals everybody knew he had was a chimpanzee, Bubbles, because Bubbles used to appear with him on whatever in media events. But Neil, our office had received a complaint that some of the endangered species at this zoo were being mistreated. So potentially that could be a violation of the Endangered Species Act criminal provisions because it could be essentially take of endangered species. So Michael Jackson and his ranch and his zoo, Neverland Ranch Zoo, had a permit to have these animals for educational purposes and display. So we had a right to go up there and inspect. But Neil didn't know quite what we were going to find, so we thought, well, we better have a couple vehicles and at least 2 agents. Not that it was dangerous, but just you don't know what you're going to encounter. So I am up in Monterey, which is about a 5.5 hour drive from Los Angeles. So I head back on the day we're scheduled to meet. I meet Neil at the gate to Neverland Ranch in Santa Barbara County. And there's a security guard there. And Neil goes in. Neil had already said he's coming to do the inspection, so they knew we were coming. And Neil identifies himself to the security guard. I identify myself. We show him our credentials. And immediately the security guard presents us with a non-disclosure agreement that we're supposed to sign. We can't get on the property unless we sign the agreement. Well, I was still pretty new agent. I wasn't quite sure exactly how to handle these things, but Neil knew what he was doing. So he flat out said, nope, we're not signing that document. And the security guard kind of got flustered. He didn't know what to do, right? He's not supposed to let us on, yet we are federal agents there to do an inspection. The zoo has a permit to have these animals. Part of that permit, agreeing to or having the permit requires you to submit to inspections when requested by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So we didn't need a warrant. We could come on and to do an inspection, and we'd given him notice we were coming, so it wasn't like it was a surprise. So we went back and forth. The security guard called his supervisor. Basically, they held firm. You aren't coming on unless you sign the agreement. So in the end, Neil and I signed the agreement because we knew it had absolutely no legal effect. We would be allowed to talk about anything we saw on that ranch. So we go on, and I follow Neil, and we're driving on this long, winding road through this kind of oak hill, rolling green hills with oak trees, and we finally come over the hill, and down into this little valley is this huge mansion, and we immediately recognized it as the Neverland Ranch, Michael Jackson's home. And we were, both of us, of course, are watching for Michael Jackson. Didn't see any movement around the house, not even any cars near the house. But, you could see the swimming pool with the statues of Peter Pan and all that stuff were out there. And there were lights on in the home, but it didn't look like anybody was moving around there. Actually, we didn't think Michael Jackson was home at the time because you have to remember this is 2005. This was very shortly after he had been charged with child molestation and had been acquitted after a pretty lengthy, high-profile, pretty traumatic trial for him. So after that trial, he really soured on his home there at Neverland Ranch, and he pretty much left. And I don't know where he was living, Las Vegas or wherever. He went to another one of his homes. And honestly, I'm not really sure he ever went back to Neverland Ranch after that. It was sold at some point after that, and the zoo was shut down. And I don't think I think that experience with the trial really soured him on his whole life there in the Santa Barbara on the ranch there. So we didn't see him. But beyond the house, maybe, I don't know, 100 yards or so further down this one track, paved road, is the zoo. And you could see there were amusement rides. There was a Ferris wheel, a merry-go-round, different types of rides. And then stretching off down the valley were walkways, buildings, exhibits. This place was a real zoo. But the weirdest thing about it was, really, once we got there, we told the security guard who had led us, or we had followed the security guard up there. We told him, hey, we're going to go do an inspection. We don't want you around, basically. So he hung around at his car, I guess. We didn't see him after that. Neil and I went through this entire zoo, looking at every single exhibit, every single animal, and pretty much documenting what kind of condition they were in, and making notes of questions we might have for anybody, the keepers, people who were involved in animal care. And it was a surreal experience because it was later in the afternoon, so it was kind of getting a little dark-ish. where the sun was kind of concealed behind the trees in the hills. And it was totally empty, right? It was almost like a post-apocalyptic walk through a zoo, or all people had vanished from the earth, and here you are in this zoo with the animals are still there, but nobody's there. I think we did see like one maintenance worker at some point on our inspection, but otherwise, nothing. This is just such a surreal experience. Very quiet, right? Except for the noise of animals. But we went through the zoo, and it was astonishing. There were 2 live tigers, so 2 endangered species. Not sure what, I think they were Indo-Chinese tigers, but they kind of the common tiger. 2 live adult tigers. There was a live African elephant, adult, subadult, and a giraffe, an orangutan. And then there was an entire reptile room, a large alligator, lots of snakes and reptiles, which Neil was really interested in. I am not into reptiles. I did not care for that part of it. But it was just fascinating to see how many highly protected animals were present in the zoo. We did not see Bubbles, the chimp. I think Bubbles was gone by that time. I don't know what happened to Bubbles. I think he's moved to another facility or something. But also interesting, the animals were in pretty good shape. We didn't see any that appeared to be too stressed out. Actually, none were stressed out. Some of the enclosures were pretty small. Like the elephant was in a pretty small indoor enclosure, but it did have an outdoor enclosure it could go to during the day. Giraffes were in a pretty small enclosure, but they appeared in good physical condition. They weren't pacing. They weren't doing any behaviors that looked like they were under any kind of mental stress or anything like that. The tigers were pretty chilled out. I think they would have eaten us and killed us if they could. They gave us some pretty hard looks. But, again, they weren't pacing, and their fur was in good condition. They had good body weight and body condition. And in the end, I think Neil did interview the animal caretakers after that at some point. He didn't do it that day. I don't know why they weren't there with us during the inspection. Seems like they would have wanted to have been and should have been. But, we never verified any legitimate care issues related to the endangered species held on the Neverland Ranch, which was kind of reassuring, but it was truly a bizarre experience to be a special agent, armed, going on Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch to inspect his zoo and the animals he kept there especially right after he had been charged with child molestation and acquitted after a jury trial. So all I remember of that experience is we took pretty cool pictures. I'll post some of those on the website. If you're interested, go over to the website, take a look. And I had a great time with Neil. Neil was always had a very positive attitude about the work that he did. He always did a professional job, and he was a great agent to work with. That's the story. That's the story of the Neverland Ranch, Michael Jackson and his endangered species, and the unsubstantiated complaint that he was mistreating them. Okay, a short bonus episode for today. Listen, season 3 is looking good. I am very, very happy with the guest list. We're going to have about 16 episodes for you for season 3, and that's a little reward for the delay. I got a little sick in February, came down with a bad chest cold that turned into pneumonia, so that kind of shut down my interview schedule for a while, and we got a little behind. But we're back on track now. Season's done, in the can, and premieres June 2nd. Don't forget to tune in, tell your friends and family, and as always, thanks for being a listener. We'll see you next time. Nature's Secret Service is written and produced by me, Ed Newcomer, and is co-produced by the DHTV team here at California State University, Dominguez Hills. Follow us on social media and connect with us online at naturesecretservice.com.